Okay, hi stage 5, and here's my really basic remix of the Toccata and Fugue, and it's starting to look a little bit poor because a lot of you've done work on your remixes and it's starting to look a lot better. We're just going to take a look at EQ today, this thing called EQ, which is short. There's a button down there for it. Okay, for equalization. So, if we select whichever track here, okay, and I should explain probably the difference between audio tracks and MIDI tracks. I'll explain that in class, okay? But the blue ones are what we call audio tracks, and that's where your microphone works, and you can even record your own voice or whatever in there. And MIDI tracks is where it's a software instrument. The sounds are playing inside. So that's where you connect a keyboard and you play the sounds on your keyboard, okay? So that's a MIDI track, all right? So the MIDI file that you've downloaded and are working on are all software generated sounds in Garageband, okay? So, okay, so we're going to have a listen to our synthetic voice here, the melody here. Okay, and if we press um, this headphone button there, that's called the solo button. On a mixing desk in a studio, there'd be a button on each channel marked solo, and the sound engineer uses the solo button to pick out a certain track and hear it in isolation. Very handy tool. So in GarageBand 2, when we hit the headphone button there, a lot of people I see in Year 7, they're hitting the headphone button on every single track. Sort of defeats the purpose. Okay, so let's have a listen to this. And I've picked it out, I've soloed that track. And that's a really handy thing to do when we're adjusting the EQ. So now, that's if we're adjusting the EQ of the whole track or the master track, that's everything. Okay, I'll show you how to do that. But here, we click on EQ, and it looks like I've already done a little adjustment here. All right, so we learned, see these numbers down here, they refer to the hertz, Hertz, not Hurts. But depending on who's playing, if it's the four fills, it might hurt a little bit. Hi, little joke there. Okay, down here, 20 hertz, 50 hertz, that's so low and boomy that you can barely hear it. It's right down low. Okay, around 500 hertz, that's about a high C on the piano. Okay, so that's what we call the mid-range there. If we were able to pick out in that range there 440 hertz, okay, then that would adjust, that would be A on the piano, okay? Up here, 5K means 5,000 hertz, 10,000 hertz, 20,000 hertz. Adult, you'd all have a wider frequency range than I would, because as we get older, we lose the top end. So I could probably only hear to about 8 to 10,000 hertz, whereas you young things can probably all hear up to about 12, 13,000 hertz. Okay, or 10 to 12 kilohertz. All right, there's another way of saying it. So that's the really high up sign, the really high voices. So if you've got a choir and the girls are a little bit sort of, female voices a bit sort of squeaky, whatever, you pull those frequencies down. Okay, so that's what happens if we pull those high frequencies down while we listen to this. Hear that? And it makes it a bit more mellow, because from about around about 3,000-4,000 hertz, that's 2,000 hertz, and you'll see how it's organised sort of in bands. Okay, so we can pull certain bands up or down. It became a bit more mellow by pulling that whole frequency range down, that whole high frequency range. What if we boosted it? So let's hear. And if I boost that high frequency range, makes it a little bit more sort of harsh. Okay, let's play around with some of these other. What if we boost or pull down? See, some people only boost frequencies in their EQ, and they, sometimes you can make a sound a whole lot better if you learn to pull certain frequencies out as well. Okay, let's have a listen to this. So when we pull the bass out, those bass frequencies down, okay, so here these numbers mean how many decibels we're boosting, and these numbers down here tell us how many decibels we're decreasing, okay? So that's how it works. That's boosting above the line. You're boosting those frequencies. If we pull it down below the line, we're decreasing those frequencies. Okay, and you hear what it does to the sound. Okay, very quickly, let's have a look at, if we go master track, and you need to unsolo for that, then this EQ here, you can see that's what we call flat response at the moment. We're not boosting or decreasing anything, but because we've clicked on the master, then this EQ is applying to all of the tracks. So let's have a listen to this. We need to hear what happens when we get here, and we've got all the instruments. Boosted that middle there, those drums were distorting. Okay, so that's another thing you need to watch out for. If you just boost things all over the place, then Garageband doesn't have this feature, but the digital audio workstation I use, Cubase, tells me it lights up red when I'm distorting, because if you're selling a track, you're remixing and you're selling a track and there's distortion on it, that's really bad. So you need to be making sure that you don't get that crumbly sound that we call distortion, okay, from boosting frequencies and volume too much. Okay, so that's a little introduction to EQ, or equalization.